There is a terrifying limit to the power of prayer. We like to believe that if we pray hard enough, if we suffer enough, we can save anyone. But Padre Pio, the man who arguably had the direct phone line to heaven, found out the hard way that this isn't true. This is a man who reportedly wrestled demons in his cell. A man who physically bore the wounds of Christ. He saved thousands. But there is a story, a dark, hushed tradition in the Capuchin order that says he once watched a soul fall into the abyss. And the most chilling part? He couldn't stop it. He didn't fail because he wasn't holy enough. He failed because of something much scarier. Something you and I use every single day without thinking. This is the story of the one soul Padre Pio saw condemned forever, and the terrifying reason why even a saint was powerless to save him. To understand why this vision broke him, you first have to understand the sheer horsepower of the man involved. Padre Pio wasn't just a priest, he was a walking spiritual anomaly. Born Francesco Forgione in the dusty town of Pietrelcina, this wasn't a normal kid. Most children have imaginary friends. Tradition says Francesco had conversations with angels, but he also had visitors that weren't so friendly. Accounts from his childhood describe a boy tormented by shadow figures, a kid living in a war zone between heaven and hell before he could even read. By the time he was 15 and donned the Capuchin habit, he was already a veteran of spiritual warfare. But in 1918, the stakes went nuclear. While praying in the choir loft, he received the stigmata. We aren't talking about symbolic marks. For 50 years, until the day he died, he reportedly bled from his hands, feet, and side. Cupfuls of blood every single day. He was a living crucifix. This unexplainable phenomenon turned him into a global magnet. But here is the thing. He didn't care about the fame. He cared about the battlefield inside the confessional. They called him the prisoner of the confessional, because he would sit in that small wooden box for 15, sometimes 19 hours a day. That box was his operating theater. He was performing open-heart surgery on souls, and he was terrifyingly good at it. You couldn't lie to him. There are thousands of testimonies of people walking in, trying to hide a dark secret, only for Pio to smell it on them, literally smelling the scent of sulfur or decay, and tell them exactly what they did 10 years ago. He was a spiritual sniper. He could pick off a sin from a mile away. He would weep, beg, and suffer for these people. His philosophy was brutal but beautiful. I take the hit first. He believed he could absorb the spiritual debt of others through his own suffering. He was winning the war, one soul at a time. The barrier between this world and the next was paper-thin for him. He spoke to the dead as easily as you speak to your barista, which makes the story of his failure even more disturbing. But before we get to the nightmare, we have to look at a success story, a ghost story that actually went right. This sets the baseline. There is a famous account, part of the lore of San Giovanni Rotondo, about a night in 1908. Pio is praying alone. The monastery is silent. Suddenly, the floorboards creak. He looks up and sees an old man sitting in the shadows. Now, Pio doesn't panic. He assumes it's a visitor. He asks the man, "Who are you?" The man looks up, eyes hollow, and says, "I am Pietro di Mauro." The air in the room drops. The man explains he died in this very monastery in a fire caused by his own negligence, a cigar he fell asleep with. He was a friar who got lazy, caused a disaster, and died in the smoke. He tells Pio, "I am in purgatory. I need one mass, just one mass, and I can go home." This is the power Pio wielded. He wasn't scared. He was moved. He promised the mass. The man vanished. The next day, Pio checks the records. Pietro di Mauro died September 18th, 1908. Burns and asphyxiation. It checked out. Pio celebrated the mass, and he felt the soul release. This was his job. He was a bridge. He could reach into the fire of purgatory and pull people out. So, if he could save a man who burned down a monastery, what kind of monster could he not save? This brings us to the terrifying theology of the final choice. This is the part that makes people uncomfortable. We live in a world that loves the idea of a fluffy, automatic heaven. But the world Padre Pio lived in was governed by a much sharper law: free will. It's the most dangerous weapon you have. The theology is simple. but ruthless. God is a gentleman. He will never ever rape your will. He offers the door, but you have to walk through it. Padre Pio understood that mortal sin wasn't just breaking a rule. It was a conscious decision to tell God, I don't need you. It's cutting the lifeline. And if you cut the line and refuse to grab it again before you die, God respects that decision. Hell, in this view, isn't a torture chamber designed by an angry landlord. It's a panic room you lock from the inside. It is the definitive state of self-exclusion. You aren't thrown there, you jump. And Padre Pio knew that once a soul jumps, once they cross the threshold of death with that no stamped on their heart, the deal is sealed. Now we arrive at the vision, the story that haunted him. It's not in the official canonization papers, but it survives in the oral tradition of the friars as a warning. Picture the scene. It's night again. The sanctuary lamp is flickering. Pio is deep in prayer, arguably traversing the spiritual planes. Suddenly, the atmosphere shifts. It's not the warm glow of a holy presence. It's not even the desperate heat of a soul in purgatory. It is cold, absolute zero. A spiritual vacuum sucks the air out of the room. Pio turns, and there, standing before the altar, is a soul. But it looks wrong. A soul from purgatory usually looks like it's in pain, yes, but it's a hopeful pain. It's a burning desire to be clean. This thing? This soul was wrapped in a darkness that light couldn't touch. It was a black hole in the shape of a man. But the most terrifying detail wasn't fire, and it wasn't screams. It was the silence. It was the stillness. The soul was completely, horrifyingly motionless. Padre Pio, reacting with his instinct to save, immediately began to storm the gates of heaven. He threw his prayers at this soul. He offered his own suffering. He begged God for mercy. He tried to do what he did for Pietro di Mauro. He tried to build a bridge, but something impossible happened. His prayers bounced off. They hit an invisible glass wall and fell to the floor. For the first time, the saint was helpless. He realized with a jolt of horror that the barrier wasn't coming from God. God's mercy was flooding the room, surrounding the soul, pressing in on all sides. The barrier was coming from the soul. The soul was rejecting the prayers. It didn't want them. It had become so twisted, so turned inward on itself, that it had lost the capacity to love. It had lost the capacity to want help. In that frozen moment, Padre Pio saw the true face of damnation. It wasn't God torturing a man. It was a man who had chosen to be incapable of God. The soul dissolved into the void, not because it was pushed, but because it belonged there. It merged with the darkness, because that's what it had become. Padre Pio was left weeping on the stone floor. He was devastated, not because God was cruel, but because human will is that powerful. We have the power to say no forever. This vision changed him. It took his intensity and dialed it up to 11. This is why he was so harsh in the confessional. He wasn't being mean. He was desperate. He saw every unconfessed mortal sin as the seed of that eternal stillness. He was trying to shock people awake before they fell into that coma. He would later say, "If you knew the value of a soul, you would not be able to live." He meant it literally. He had seen the alternative. He realized that while he was on earth, he could fight, he could bleed, he could scream for us. But he couldn't force us. He could knock on the door of your heart until his knuckles bled, but he couldn't kick it down. Only you can open it. This story isn't meant to scare you into submission. It's meant to wake you up to your own power. You are holding a loaded gun called free will. Every day, with every choice, you are aiming. Padre Pio's tragedy reminds us that the gates of hell are locked from the inside. And the key? It's in your pocket right now. If this deep dive into the mysteries of the soul made you think, hit that subscribe button. We explore the darker, deeper side of faith and history here. Let me know in the comments. Do you think free will is a gift or a curse? I read every single one. See you in the next one.